So I think it's finally time that we do a bit of a recap of the best ITX cases at the moment. Now, those of you who are familiar with the channel will know that I do kind of lean a little bit more towards ITX and compact systems. I just find them a lot more interesting, a lot more useful, and they just seem a little bit more practical when these days most people are only building with a single GPU. Now, some of you might remember the V1 and the V2 of this video. I've kind of done this roundup video before. The last time I did this, it was in 2020, and the main criticism that I got from you guys was that I should be restricting this list to only cases that you can buy. So that's exactly what we'll be doing for this list this time around. And this list will also be a little bit biased towards GPU compatibility, GPU performance. I really think that is just going to be a huge point moving forward. You know, 2-slot cases, as cool as they are, as compact and small as they are, they do really restrict you in terms of what your GPU options are and what your GPU options look like in the future. So all of the cases in this list, despite being compact ITX cases, will be able to fit huge graphics cards like this and cool them reasonably effective as well. Now, the big question mark for some of you here is like, why even go ITX in the first place? Why would I voluntarily transfer my big roomy airflow system into a small hotbox and just get worse performance? And for those of you who have built a big mid-tower PC and you've just built it, put it on the floor, forgotten about it, and you just use it and clean it once a year, I would actually recommend to just continue doing that. If you don't really care too much about your PC and you're just really caring about gaming and using it, then there's nothing wrong with that at all. I do think that actually covers most PC gamers. This is by no means an ITX propaganda video and kind of pushing everyone to downsize their system. I really just want to make that clear. But I would say that if you are a PC gamer, you do have a PC on your desk taking up a lot of room, then yeah, I would encourage you to maybe consider downsizing your PC. There are still many advantages of going with a larger ATX mid-tower build though, the main ones being the ability to run more system RAM, custom loops are a lot easier and a lot more effective, and of course you have the option for multiple PCIe slots, so you can run multiple GPU setups if that's something that you really need to do, or you can throw in multiple PCIe add-in cards like Thunderbolt cards or USB expansion cards that you might need. When it comes to cooling though, I would say that ITX cases have gotten a lot better over the past year. You have a lot more great options, and you'd be very surprised by how cool and quiet these options are. And that leads us into our first category, which is the highest performance option. And if you're looking to downsize your system or build something relatively compact and you just don't want to worry about compromising performance at all, then you really can't beat the Cooler Master NR200P Max. This case is only sold as a kit, so it comes with a 280ml liquid cooler pre-installed up top, as well as an 850 watt 80 plus gold SFX power supply. But that's one of the best parts about this case in my opinion, because it makes it so easy to build in. All you have to do is install your CPU cooler mounting hardware onto the motherboard, install the motherboard into the case, wire everything up, and then install your GPU. Very minimal effort and building time, and in the end you basically have a system that runs cooler than most high airflow mid towers while being way more compact. It also fits massive graphics cards, and I'd have no problem recommending this case for those with the most power hungry GPUs on the market. At slightly over 18 liters in volume though, it is the biggest case on this list, so definitely still what I would call ITX and compact for a desk setup, but pretty big compared to our next option. And that is the new Dan A4 H2O, which is a case that I'm a really big fan of. I mean, just look at how small this thing is. You know, 11 liters in total volume. This thing can fit a 240ml liquid cooler, the ROG Strix card that we had a look at before. It's about as small as I'd recommend going before you start really compromising performance. Now, there are many ITX cases that are way smaller than this thing. You've got the Velka 357, you've got the Skyreach 4 Mini, and even the original Dan A4, which is a little bit smaller than this. But once you start going that small, you really are limiting your options when it comes to your GPU. Forget about putting an RTX 3080, there just really isn't any that will fit in those cases, and even if there were, cooling would be a massive problem. The Dan A4 H2O, on the other hand, is seriously uncompromising when you factor in how small this thing actually is. You can fit your standard 240ml liquid coolers, although tube routing can be a little tricky, and decently sized 3-slot graphics cards can fit quite snugly. 3-slot cards up to 318 mils in length will fit here, so the ROG Strix, for example, but cards like the MSI Gaming X Trio and Gigabyte Eagle will not. GPU thermals as well, very decent for a case that can practically fit in a backpack. The top exhaust fans work really well to pull the heat right out of the case. Next up, I want to talk about the best case for compact water cooling. So compact ITX custom loops. Here I have the SUPT Meshlicious. Now, I have actually done a custom loop in this case, and not only does it look pretty good, I think it's one of the best custom loops I've ever done, but the performance with a single 280mm radiator was really surprising. There I saw the GPU sitting barely above 50 degrees C with the fans running at just 1300 RPM, which is seriously good performance. Pump and res mounting can be a bit tricky, but you do have a few options out there. Generally, a small EK pump res combo can be installed somewhere above or in front of the GPU block. Aesthetically, I think a cylindrical res can look pretty sweet up top, although it can be a little bit tricky and, tedious to get completely filled. There are smaller options out there that I would probably recommend instead, like the EK FLT 120 or the FLT 80. Regardless of how you go about it though, this is definitely a setup where you could run a 3090 and a 12900K, no problem at all. I'd love to give this to the Ncase M1 as that's what I currently have my system in, and performance there is really incredible, but that's no longer a case that you can actually buy. Now, on the flip side of the few $1,000 extreme custom loops, which everyone loves to be honest, if you're more concerned about building something practical, something based around value, that's where I would recommend the base Cooler Master NR200. And I mean, this thing is just so hard to beat. It's no wonder that it has so far convinced so many people to switch to ITX. And I mean, even for someone like me who has built plenty of high-end systems, there is just something really satisfying about building something compact, great value, no fuss, and with a really efficient airflow setup. So really there's not a whole lot to say here. At $70, there is really no other case better than the NR200 to house your affordable to mainstream system, even all the way up to your enthusiast builds. It's also a great solution if you're someone who doesn't really want to spend a whole lot of money on a case and instead you'd prefer to allocate as much budget to your CPU and GPU as possible. By no means are you cheaping out by going with the NR200. As we've seen, with pretty minimal effort you can get some insanely good thermal performance out of this thing, and I've even built a triple radiator custom loop in this case, although that's not something that I'd really recommend. For the price and value here though, you really cannot go wrong. And so that leaves one category left, and that is the best overall. And I think the choice here is going to surprise a few of you. I'm actually giving this to the NZXT H1 V2. Now, let me just explain my reasoning here for a second. So by best overall, we're not talking about, excelling in any single category. We're talking about overall, combined the best thermal performance, how the case looks, the footprint and the volume. We're talking about, how easy is the case to build in, what's the availability like, and also when it comes to GPU compatibility as well. What graphics cards can you actually fit in this case? Now, the H1's thermal performance is definitely what I'd call respectable, not chart topping, but definitely safe for upwards of a 3080, especially if you're considering undervolting, and the pre-installed 140mm liquid cooler is a great solution for modern gaming CPUs. Aesthetically, I also think the NZXT H1 is also a really nice looking case. I know this is a bit of a subjective point, but I feel like it's just the right balance between ventilated panels and tempered glass to keep the case breathing well and also looking good at the same time. Not everyone is a fan of full mesh, although that does lead to the best performance. And to top things off, building in this thing is unbelievably easy. I mean, no exaggeration here. 15 minutes at most is all you need to put aside to get your system up and running, and the cable management is practically already done for you. Now let's talk about this thing versus the SUPT Meshlicious. Graphics card compatibility in the H1 to begin with is slightly better. The H1 can fit the ROG Strix, the Gaming X Trio, the Gigabyte Eagle cards a lot more hassle-free, and at the same time you don't have to use a right-angle DisplayPort adapter to get things up and running. This also means that you won't have any problems running multi-monitor setups in the H1 either, since regular cables work just fine. I do also feel that for most people, a 240mm or 280mm liquid cooler for the CPU in the Meshlicious is maybe a little bit too much. I think for gaming systems, the 140mm liquid cooler in the H1 is a little bit more balanced. For something like a 12600K, you can run full boost, no problem. So for gaming systems, video editing systems, the H1 kind of offers the best balance of everything. For me, it kind of just ticks all of the boxes for what most people are looking for in an ITX build, and that's why I'm giving it the best overall. Then we have some honorable mentions. So first up, we have the Fantex Shift X XT, which is a pretty cool looking case. I have done a build in it, I have done some testing with it. You'll see the GPU thermals on the chart, but I just don't think I'll do like a dedicated video review on it because I just don't think it really excels in any category. Most people will be buying this case because it looks pretty cool on the exterior. The case can also be set to different heights using the included spaces, with the liquid cooled setup offering the best proportions, the best thermal performance, and also the full view of that epic front lighting effect. GPU thermals, even in this configuration though, is kind of below average, especially considering that it's now around 17 liters in total volume with this setup. I also really dislike how the top panel is never fully locked into the case. It just kind of loosely sits on top, which I'm not a big fan of. I'll also mention the Lee & Lee Q58. Again, similar to the Shift XT, it's a roomy sandwich layout case, but I just don't think it's one that's overly impressive in any aspect. And lastly, I'll mention the Formed T1. This is a case that I'm still a big fan of, especially when it comes to an all air-cooled setup, but it's been out of production for a long time now. So if you were looking to build in the T1, I'd say the Dan A4H2O is a pretty decent alternative for now. Similar size, better GPU compatibility and slightly better thermals, and actually available to buy. So that pretty much wraps up my recommendations for the moment. I think generally the ITX market is looking pretty strong, and I think it's a pretty good time if you are looking to build something compact or maybe downsize your mid-tower ATX build. I will leave some links down below for those interested. As always, a huge thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.